Let's send all our nuclear waste into space. At first glance, it seems like a simple solution to our nuclear waste problems, right? But hold on to your head, because the more we think about it, the worse it gets. Welcome to my channel where I see into all things about science, tech and crazy ideas. First, let's talk about what nuclear waste is. It's not just some harmless trash you can throw in your bin. It comes in three categories, the lowest being 90% of the waste. Things like clothes, tools and weakly contaminated trash. Not too shabby, right? But wait, there's more. The next level is intermediate waste, mostly made of materials that have been in close proximity to a reactor core and can be dangerously radioactive. This stuff needs proper handling, either by safely burying it or melting it down and storing it deep underground. Now here's where the real trouble begins. High-level nuclear waste. This is concentrated spent fuel taken out of a reactor core, made up of various dangerous and highly radioactive elements. Not only is it incredibly hot, but it's also not easy to handle. And get this, around 440 active nuclear reactors create about 11,000 tons of this waste every year. Since 1955, we have accumulated a whopping 400,000 tons of this dangerous radioactive waste. Yikes. So, what's the solution? Shoot it into space, of course. It's big, empty and nobody lives there, right? Well, not exactly. There's a few tiny problems with this plan. First of all, launching all that waste into space would require a lot of rocket fuel, which means a lot of pollution. And what happens if the rocket explodes mid-flight? We're talking about radioactive waste raining down on us from space. But wait, there's more. Even if we manage to successfully launch all that waste into space, it's not like we can just forget about it. It's still out there, floating around in space, potentially colliding with other objects and creating even more problems. Plus, what happens if some alien species stumbles upon it and decides to use it for their own evil purposes? So, there you have it. Shooting nuclear waste into space is not the easy solution we thought it was. It's a bad idea, a horrible idea. And the longer you think about it, the worse it gets. Let's focus on finding a safer, more responsible way to dispose of this dangerous waste, shall we? Problem number 1. Things aren't cheap. You see, space travel may be all the rage nowadays, but it's still a costly venture. Like really costly. We are talking $4,000 per 1 kilogram just to get something into low Earth orbit. Yikes. That's more than it costs to mine, separate and fabricate 1 kilogram of nuclear fuel. And if you're talking about launching nuclear waste into space, well, that's a whole other level of expensive. To launch the waste from just one nuclear reactor, we are looking at a price tag of at least $100 million per year. And to deal with all the waste from the 440 nuclear power plants currently in operation, brace yourselves folks, because we are talking about a whopping $44 billion per year. And that's before you even factor in packaging, transport and security costs. Now you might be thinking, who cares? Let's just shoot the waste into space and be done with it. But here's the kicker, we can't. There simply aren't enough rockets to handle all the toxic junk. In 2021 a record 135 launches took place, but even if we repurposed every single one of those rockets for nuclear waste disposal, we would only be able to lift about 800 tons into low Earth orbit. To handle all the waste we are producing today, let alone the massive amounts already in temporary storage, we would need at least 14 times more rockets. We are talking about creating entire new industries just to deal with all the giant toxic space trash trucks we would need. It's a daunting task and one that comes with a hefty price tag. So next time you are bemoaning the cost of your daily latte, just remember, stuff ain't cheap, especially when it comes to space travel. Problem number 2, little space. We only calculated for low Earth orbit, where we launch a majority of our rockets and satellites. Thousands of casks of spent nuclear fuel littering the orbit around Earth would be a nightmare for space debris management and satellite collision avoidance. Worse, at this height, there is still some atmosphere generating drag. So we may have nuclear waste pouring down from space in a few years. This is considered a major issue by experts. We clearly need to launch our garbage farther. If we wanted to launch it to the moon, we would either need a lot more rockets or much larger ones, making it even more costly. A single Saturn V rocket, which was employed by the Apollo program and cost around $1.5 billion, adjusted for inflation each launch, could transport about 43.5 tons from Earth to the moon. As a result, we would need around 260 Saturn V rocket launches every year. Of course, utilizing the moon as a target for nuclear waste tipped rockets creates a massive issue. So maybe we shouldn't strive for anything. Space is empty. Do we really need a target? Firing garbage in any random direction is, as you would expect, a horrible idea. Orbits are loops, which implies they tend to return to their starting point. So, we would want to shoot our nuclear waste into outer space, which means we would need even larger, more costly rockets. We wouldn't be fully protected then. Earth may collide with these interplanetary cascades in the long future, resulting in a beautiful meteor shower consisting of radioactive dust. Okay. But what about shooting it into the sun? Surprisingly, the sun is difficult to strike. Also, the sun has incredible high gravity. Everything on Earth is moving with regard to the solar, including the rockets we launch, which means a rocket would have to zero out all of its orbital motion around the sun in order to cease cycling and fall in. As a result, it is actually simpler to launch a rocket completely outside of the solar system than it is to send towards the sun. Yet in order to perform any of these things, we will need much larger rockets, maybe the largest we have ever created. Nothing is working. The problem is that things continue to get worse. Problem number 3. Rocket launch. Brace yourself, space enthusiasts, because this is a big one. We've come a long way in rocket engineering, and while they are much safer than they used to be, they are still not foolproof. In fact, out of the 146 launches in 2021, there were 11 failures. That's like playing Russian roulette with a radioactive bullet. And we are not talking about some harmless toy rockets here. We are talking about rockets carrying high-level radioactive waste that could potentially explode on the launch pad. Disassemble mid-flight or crashed at hypersonic speeds. Yikes. Imagine mini Chernobyls happening all over the world, except instead of being contained under a slab of concrete, they are spreading throughout the atmosphere. Radioactive particles could travel far and wide, hitching a ride on the winds and falling on farmlands, getting concentrated into our food or even entering our water supply. It's a nuclear nightmare that could turn our world into a wasteland. So, while we have replaced the toxic fuels of the past with much saner mixes of liquid oxygen and hydrogen or kerosene, we are still not out of the woods yet. And let's not forget that even if we manage to launch our nuclear waste without any explosions, we are still facing the challenge of what to do with it once it's up there. It's like the ultimate game of hot potato, except instead of a potato, it's a ticking time bomb of a radioactive waste. Good luck with that one. Nuclear waste is a scary topic, no doubt about that. But it's not just the fear of it that's the problem, it's also the fact that we are pretty bad at understanding risk. Sure, we worry about launching our radioactive waste into space and causing all kinds of intergalactic mayhem, but did you know that the largest amounts of radioactive amounts are actually released by burning coal? Yeah, turns out that when we burn millions of tons of coals each year, we leave behind about 36,000 tons of radioactive materials. Now, it's not as radioactive as high-level nuclear waste, but there's a lot more of it, and we are way less careful with it. We just shove it into leaky mines, pile it up in the open air, or pour it into ponds that regularly spill into our waterways. And if you live within 1.6 kilometers of one of those ash piles, your cancer risk increases up to 2,000 times over the acceptable limit. Yikes. But for some reason, nuclear power plants are more difficult to sell than coal power plants. Sure, nuclear energy has its flaws and we need to find better ways to handle the waste. But we do have good methods, like burying it deep underground or reprocessing it into new fuel. So let's be clear. Shooting nuclear waste into space is one of the worst ideas ever. Let's focus on the real issue at hand and find a way to deal with it, before we all end up glowing in the dark. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the wonders of science. I hope you enjoyed learning about the latest discoveries and mind-blowing concepts. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a video. Keep exploring.